Hello, everybody. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. My name is Martin Loffers. I'm the Chief Trend Watcher of Supply Chain Media. You may also know me as the Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Movement, the European Quarterly and bi-weekly newsletter and a website. And I'm also the architect of the SCM IT Subway Map. And we also have a consultancy shape and form of this visualization. So welcome to this live webinar. We will talk about supply chain digitalization. So how to drive your supply chain to a digital success through intelligent steering. So with me, I have two experts. So let me introduce them to you. First, Carrie van Rood, Director Retail in IG&H Consulting. So she has been working in Accenture, Nike, at Interim, and Civil Logistics. Hi, Carrie.
Hello, good afternoon.
And next, we have Karin Sarkisian. He is a manager retail, also at the same consulting of IG&H. So welcome.
Thank you, Martijn.
Yeah, and you've been working at a startup, Shashlik Mashlik, a barbecue startup, and also PwC, and in the chemicals and ExxonMobil. So we
Indeed.
have two experts, and they will show and tell what they're doing in this interesting world of the digital supply chain. And we have also great cases to have a practical feeling what it is. So a few things before we start. This webinar will be recorded and this PDF will be made available afterwards within 48 hours. So the audience is on mute, but feel free to ask questions. And you see two options to ask questions. Of course, you have the chat function. It's not ChatGPT, but it's a chat function, so you can ask questions. Probably the first question, will this be recorded? Yes. And next, the Q&A is the one I will be tracking. So if you have questions to the audience, to Carrie and Karen, please ask them in the Q&A functionality. If these questions are in line of what we are discussing, I will ask this question right away. At the end, we have also a Q&A, so we will ask questions. And next, there are also 30 minutes afterwards, an after talk. So after 5 o'clock, we have an extra 30 minutes. You can talk to Karen and Carrie directly. So it's like a kind of Zoom meeting. So we'll be sitting at table 1, so you can ask this question directly to them. So you can join us at the table if you have more questions. As of now, we are putting off our camera, so you can enlarge your screen, so you have a better view on the slides, what we're going to discuss. So first, to introduce IG&H as a consulting firm. So we have our SCM Supply Chain Consulting Subway Map Europe. So we have positioned all kind of consulting firms in Europe, the big four, the strategy consultant, but also the kind of boutique supply chain consulting firms, and also IG&H is on there, and they have a subway station on the strategy line, on the distribution line, and data science. So, Kari, to you. So maybe you can tell a bit more about IG&H, and then we take it from there.
Sure, thank you, Martijn. Yeah, so you may or may not know us already, but IG&H has been a consulting firm starting out really as a boutique firm, started by two study friends in 1988 already. And at the beginning, IG&H was specializing in supply chain and operations. That was one of the two practices, and the other one was financial services, or insurance and banking, as it was called back then. From those two, it has grown quite a bit, and here we are 35 years later. And all that time, supply chain and operations has been a key focus area for IG&H, but it has also extended a lot from there. So we are now serving a variety of industries, which you will see also on the next slide, and topics, and also digital transformation is very high on the agenda. And now today we are the go-to partner for digital supply chain consulting in the three sectors that we cover.
Okay.
And as Martijn was also saying, we've been partnering with Supply Chain Media since 2006, the beginning.
Yep. And maybe you can tell us a bit more about the industries you're serving, and also the way you're doing that.
Definitely, yeah. So, in those 35 years, IG&H has grown to more than 450 employees, and we are now in 4 locations. And the 3 key industries that we cover are, we call it retail and products. And actually, it's everything that you can touch, and that you can buy. So it's very broad. It's going. The core was retail, but also logistics and industrial products are covered in there, as well as fashion and consumer goods. Then we have the health sector, so that's health insurance, but also hospitals, and the financial services, insurance and banking and pensions,
Hmm.
as the subsectors there. And cross industry, we have 4 very strong teams that represent competence. So we have a team specializing in transformations, digital transformation, but also more the operational, organizational transformations. We have a very strong data analytics team, business engineering, and the digital experience team. And we also have partnerships with a number of tech vendors and a platform services team that delivers and maintains client-specific solutions.
Okay. And maybe a question from my side. I just talked with Karen about robotic process automation and that kind of stuff. But you mentioned here you have a low code development, so that is of interest. It's very specific. Maybe you can elaborate a bit more about low code development, how you see it and how you use it within IG&H.
Sure, and I think actually later on in the examples, we will also see some examples of how low code can be leveraged to streamline processes and make them more efficient. Because what we have seen is that the traditional way of driving your business based on large, inflexible ERP solutions doesn't always cover the needs of our clients. And there are many cases where there is a specific use case or need that cannot be met by those existing solutions.
Yeah.
And this is where low code comes in, because this offers a very easy, accessible way to build a specific solution or process or facilitate something that will really bring value, and it's very easy to build. So they call it citizen development. Everybody could do it in theory, and really brings value in a short time span.
Yeah, I've analyzed the whole consulting software market, as I expressed in the software map I showed earlier, and I see more and more consultancy firms doing this kind of projects with low code development. So they don't become a real software vendor, although you have applications developed. But in the end, it's more ingrained in the whole consultancy environment, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right, and the appetite for that is growing also because there is, as I said, the ERPs, and there's also the off-the-shelf solutions that do very well in a lot of areas, but there will always be some specific topics that cannot be covered by those solutions. So there is a need to come up with real custom solutions for those cases.
Yeah. Maybe you can tell me a bit more about the kind of clients you are servicing.
Yeah, so here we have an overview, a lot of logos, but actually, and this is actually focusing on the retail and product sector,
Hmm.
as I mentioned on the page before. And actually, we engage with a lot of C-level, chief of operations, sometimes chief supply chain officer, CEOs as well. And the topics that we discuss with them really range from strategy, also propositions, customer consumer trends, to more, let's say, hardcore supply chain related topics like supply chain network strategy, and of course digitization. And we do this for really a range of clients, retail, but also, let's say, the ecosystems around retailers, like wholesalers, distributors, producers, service providers, logistic service providers. Yeah, those are the people that we converse with.
Okay. And maybe you can tell a bit more about your proposition. So what are you offering to all these kind of customers?
Yeah, we do work on both the supply and the demand side. So we make sure that our clients can deliver their clients, the optimal value. So we do that by looking at if the machine is running well, let's say. So that's the supply side. that the processes are performing efficiently, are becoming more data driven, so you can take better informed decisions. And this is also something we will touch on in the examples later on. And that they are efficient, streamlining, and also here digital and sometimes low code, as I mentioned, can play a big role. On the demand side, we also look at what is it that the consumer needs and expects, and how can we best fulfill those needs, be it on the product itself or the customer experience, or be it on delivering the right offering against the right price, and doing also data-driven analytics on those. And digital, as I mentioned before, we really see this as an accelerator. In order to meet those needs, you need to embrace digital in all your processes, and especially in the supply chain.
And you also see regarding sustainability, that's all another innovation driver in your project, I presume.
Yeah, and actually it's becoming more of a hygiene factor these days. So really traceability of the products is becoming something that is expected of companies. So and for that you really need to be able to look across the chain end to end, and have the visibility and the data to prove how the product was produced, sourced, etc.
And when I look at this slide, and when I listen to you, the commercial and supply chain business functions are becoming more integrated. So supply chain has to be more and more aware what's happening in the commercial area. It's not detached or separated like it used to be 10, 20 years ago.
Definitely, and I think that's also visualized in some of the slides we have, and the ecosystem. It's no longer a linear process or a chain. It's really an ecosystem of actors that all interact with each other and have to understand what's happening in all those segments to come up with the best solution.
Yeah, right. Okay. Before we get into the digital supply chain topic, first look what CEOs have been talking about. This is a slide of an analysis of a research firm called IoT Analytics. What they have been doing, they have listened to the quarterly earnings calls of Fortune 500 companies in the US, and they have marked down the words they have been expressing by CEOs or CFOs. And what you see in Q4 last year, on the right hand side you see the importance, and above the line the growing importance. Well, in the upper right you see interest rates, but also supply chain. Maybe it's sliding down a bit in growth, but still very important. You see it on the right hand side. So when you look back to this analysis in the last years, you saw supply chain upper right coming up. So CEOs and CFOs were talking about supply chain, and also supply chain disruption still on the right hand side of importance. So that's Q4, and in Q1. All of a sudden, ChatGPT on the lower left side, upper side, very rapidly growing out of nowhere. That's obvious. ChatGPT. So CEOs are talking actually about ChatGPT, but also about AI and machine learning. And in the red boxes, you still see warehousing as an important topic, and shortages. So we're not done with all the disruptions. So these are the things what they saw in the quarterly earning calls. So Kari, do you recognize it in your conversation with executives?
Yeah, absolutely. I think digital is all over this page actually,
Yeah.
in many shapes and forms. So AI, Industry 4.0, Metaverse, ChatGPT, and this is definitely something we recognize from our conversations. And actually, one of the questions that come up most often is, how can I get value out of these trends?
Hmm.
Because they're perceived, and they are to a certain extent trends, but then what is in it for me, and how can I make it work for me? That's I think something that we have a lot of discussions about, and actually also something we will touch on in this presentation today.
Yeah. Maybe you can elaborate on the squeeze in supply chain, so with the different kind of challenges, to put it in a more practical perspective.
Yeah, so what we see, and this is not a surprise, I think, for any of you, but the demand side of where consumer behavior is changing, and the expectations are becoming more stringent. So people expect to be served on time, wherever they are, whenever they want, with the product that is customized to their needs, and that they can also understand exactly where it is coming from and if it was produced in a sustainable and ethical way. At the same time, supply chains are becoming more and more complex. There are more and more players, stakeholders. The volatility in all areas of both transportation, supply itself, so also growing produce, pricing, world crisis like Ukraine, all have a significant impact on supply chains that were already quite complex to begin with. These two together put an enormous pressure on companies and supply chains to adapt and to be, at the same time, very flexible, very agile, very customizable, but also still cost efficient and resilient. And this is almost a challenge that's very hard to overcome.
But you are a consultant, so you are very smart. So what is the way to solve all these challenges?
Well, I wish there was one button and I could say push it and you're out of the woods, but that's not the case.
No.
So in order to move towards a supply chain that is able to meet those demands, meaning that you have a resilient, efficient, sustainable, and flexible supply chain, there's two things actually that you need to realize. One is that, as we mentioned before a little bit, supply chains are no longer linear today. So all the actors, retailers, suppliers, producers, distributors, logistics providers, customers, they are all interconnected. And that also means that the different elements in the chain need to be working together, and you need to have visibility across all of those elements. And to have that kind of visibility and leverage the data that is available and becoming more and more available, and the computing power that's becoming more available, digital is the answer. So you need to look into how can I make data, machine learning, technology work for me in order to achieve this interconnected ecosystem supply chain setup.
Yeah, and an interesting part, getting back to the low code, this sounds like the holy grail, and I think that all the major software vendors, the SAPs, the Oracles, and you name them, in the last decades, we're talking about it, end-to-end supply chain visibility, connect them all, but it seemed like a holy grail. But now with computing power, but also with AI and low code, it's getting into reach.
Yes, that's correct, indeed. And also, you don't have to start by trying to create the Holy Grail. There's small things you can do, and also focusing on those areas that are most important to you. So depending on where either your bottlenecks or your biggest opportunities are, you could start by integrating more closely working more closely together with your suppliers, by using digital means, as we have an example of later on that we did for HEMA. If you are struggling with a demand pattern for your product that is highly seasonal and very unpredictable, then it could make sense to use data analytics techniques to predict your forecast more accurately.
Yeah.
So where to start really depends on your needs and on also what is the maturity level that you already have.
You already touched upon an interconnected ecosystem. Maybe you can tell a bit more. So what are the specific projects and challenges within those ecosystems?
Yeah, so just as an example, we've listed some things here where we see that from where you used to have that linear supply chain, plan, source, make, deliver, what we see is that each of those functions are actually expanding their scope to be more in connection with with the other steps in the chain, let's say, and also with all the actors. And just to give you some examples, indeed, what we've seen in our clients and in the market. So when you look at planning, this is becoming more and more integrated and advanced. And actually, later on, Karen will touch on a case that we did for a fashion retailer, where they used data analytics and machine learning techniques to better predict the forecast of the demand, and also make promotions, for example, more effective. So that's one example. When you talk about supply chain networks and make them more agile and adaptable, we have a client that is looking at expanding their supply base, and working together with suppliers in a different way, so that they can at any moment in time make informed choices on what the best supply sourcing strategy would be. When we talk about make, then we get more into the Industry X realm, let's say. And then the good example, I think, that probably a lot of people are familiar with, is Unilever. They are very advanced in having a digital twin of their manufacturing processes, so they can simulate real time what happens when, for example, the conditions change, like humidity in the air. What does it do to my final product? It's really cool, actually. I've seen some really cool demos that they did. Mm-hmm. For automated and with multimodal logistics flows, what you see is that also with the world moving more towards omni-channel, the demand for the ways to deliver a product to a consumer have also changed. And as an example, I would give for bol.com, who is investing in their own distribution and collection network, and also purchased Cyclone, which is a bike courier company, to expand the options they have for in-city delivery of their products.
Yeah, all right. Okay, maybe Karen, there's a lot of talk about transformation. It's all over the place when you talk in with businesses. But maybe you can elaborate more. What do you see as the main domains of transformation?
Definitely, Martijn. So if we talk about moving from a traditional supply chain to a more digital supply chain, we can identify 3 key domains in which companies need to put in some work. So we call them hyperconnectivity, intelligent steering, and adaptive design. I think Kari have touched upon all 3 very briefly, but let me explain a bit. So if we talk about hyperconnectivity, we talk about connecting supply chains end to end by removing silos within organizations and integrating relevant supply chain partners across organizations. So if we talk within organizations, we mean that you need to seek a close collaboration between supply chain management, procurement, and commercial functions, for example. But if you talk about across supply chain, across different organizations, we talk about integrations with suppliers and logistics service providers. And all with the aim to create real-time visibility, simultaneous access to relevant information, and to enable holistic and cross-functional decision-making across the entire supply chain, and not just for a specific point in that supply chain. So if we try to make that concrete, we talk about integrating data systems of different supply chain partners, leveraging technology to track goods in real time across different supply chain stages, and also creating these collaboration structures to drive optimizations and solve issues real time.
May I ask you something in that area? Because well, ERP had the promise to connect it all within the company. Well, we still see a lot of silos still within companies using heavily ERP. But now you see, that data lakes are coming into the market. Data layers or data lakes. Is that also in that area?
Indeed, that's a very good example of this area. Okay. Creating data lakes that provide one source of truth, simultaneous access for different supply chain partners. That's in essence what we're talking about here. Yeah, that's a good example. So I think that's the first part, hyperconnectivity, and that you can also see in the visual we showed on the previous slide. If you talk about the second key domain is in intelligent steering, and intelligent steering is everything to do with developing intelligent, automated, and autonomous supply chains by taking advantage of artificial intelligence and other data science capabilities, where we aim to improve planning, enhance logistics flows, and drive decision-making through systems that can quickly adapt to change. So in essence, this has everything to do with deploying artificial intelligence, machine learning techniques to analyze data and provide actionable insights. There's everything to do with generating data-driven decision recommendations through prescriptive modeling. And maybe the last bridge would be even creating autonomous systems for decision-making without or with limited human intervention, more exception-based steering.
Okay.
So that's intelligent steering to us. And if we talk about the third key domain, is the one for adaptive design. And this has everything to do with designing configurable supply chains for flexibility and responsiveness. So creating that modularity in supply chains to quickly ramp up or down based on changing demand, but also developing a lean IT infrastructure that can support changing supply chains. And then even designing operations to be easily configurable without large and significant infrastructure changes. So the last one has really to do with creating an adaptive design of your supply chain that can be quickly ramp up or down.
I think that is also a part of resilience. I think that resilience is more to it than that, but that's a part of becoming more resilient, I think.
Indeed, I think resilience is one of the key outcomes of an adaptive design.
You're right. Maybe it sounds like Valhalla, and it sounds all great, but in reality there are a lot of struggles to get there. Maybe you can elaborate on that.
True. So of course this is a vision piece on what a digital supply chain could look like, right? But at the same time, we see that companies and even retailers are typically not well equipped to cope with the challenges that are posed with the transition. And if we look at the different clients we serve and the different kind of problems that we encounter, I think the struggle with digitization can be brought down to 5 key points, and we have listed them here. So the first one being that the legacy IT landscape is unfit for collaborative or uncollaborative advanced supply chain management. So if we talk about data lakes, it's not that easy to create a data lake on 20, 30 different systems that don't talk to each other. So having this base of systems that do not connect, do not talk to each other, that's very difficult to create that connectivity and to start sharing relevant information with each other. So that's one, I think. If we talk about the second challenge, it's about building connectivity layers on top of the IT landscape to create it transparency and visibility, right? So I think that's the point I just mentioned. If we talk about the third one, it's about the capabilities within organizations to drive technological innovation. So that has both to do with having people with the right knowledge about technology, but also about data science, especially in supply chain areas. So what we see is that a lot of companies want to leverage data and data science, but in essence, they just don't have the right people to do so.
It's not just a matter of having a Python training and you can do it.
Indeed, no, it's definitely not. So you have to have the right people, you have to have the right capabilities, you have to nurture a culture around data science and digital initiatives. It's much more than just having an AIMS or a Python license. Indeed, yeah.
Okay, all right.
And if we would finish up the list, I think the fourth and fifth one have everything to do with the ability to exploit new advanced techniques like AI, right? So you could have a data scientist working for you, but can he really tap into the potential of AI specifically for the supply chain in scope? That's a very big challenge we see. And the last one is having a clear vision or a transformation roadmap. So translating strategy into digital strategy, into initiatives that can be easily picked up and deployed. I think that's a challenge as well.
Yeah. And what we have seen in the last month with the rise of ChatGPT all over the place, people within businesses are trying out ChatGPT in their own business function, but if it's not part of a clear and pragmatic roadmap, it's just trial and error, and that's not enough.
Agree, Martijn. So there needs to be some kind of a vision as to how ChatGPT, for example, in this case, could benefit the supply chain.
Yeah.
And if there's no vision and you start experimenting, then you might get there eventually. But I think here's where companies really struggle to crystallize what they want and how they want to do it.
Yeah. So how do you start your digital journey?
Yeah, how do you start your digital journey? So I'm not going to bore you with the maturity matrix today, but I think that the essence of this slide is that the digital journey starts at a different pace, at a different place for different companies. So if we talk about hyperconnectivity, if we talk about intelligent steering, if we talk about adaptive design, all of these three key domains, they can be broken down into low digital maturity, medium digital maturity, and high digital maturity. So a company that is already leveraging AI and machine learning techniques to do supply chain planning, for example, they would have a very different approach to digitization than a company that is still working with 20 different Excel files to calculate their forecast for the coming month.
Yeah.
So the main message here is, I think, your digitization journey and supply chain management starts depending on your maturity.
Yeah. But when I look at this slide, and not to go into very deep, but basically you have defined 3 domains, and I think that the company should recognize themselves in these 3 domains. What is your maturity? And the thing is, are you happy with it, and how to progress to the next level in the maturity in each domain? And then you can see in a very specific way where you can go for the next level.
Exactly. And we're going to give 2 client examples, and I think both client examples fit in a different part of this spectrum.
Okay.
But we'll get to that.
Yeah. So maybe you have chosen 2 different kind of case studies. So maybe you can tell a bit more before we get into detail.
Yeah. So I can quickly elaborate, and then we'll move on to the first example. So we have chosen 2 client cases that we want to discuss today. One is for a leading fashion retailer, and one is for HEMA. So for the fashion retailer, we cannot disclose their name, unfortunately. But the first example for this fashion retailer has everything to do with intelligent supply chain planning. So in essence, what we did there was a company-wide program consisting of several work streams focused on improving stock replenishment and pricing by leveraging an accurate demand forecast. So really the integration of planning, pricing, and forecasting. And if we talk about HEMA, we talk about process automation and digitization. And this was essentially a company-wide program consisting of several digital initiatives that was launched to increase product availability on and offline. And that example, Kari will explain.
Okay. But maybe we can start with the fashion retailer.
Definitely. So if we talk about fashion, and if we talk about fashion retail, I think it's good to provide 2 perspectives. So we have the old-fashioned way of doing things, and we have the digital way of doing things. If we talk about the old-fashioned way in running a fashion retail business, fashion used to be really intuitive, right? Run by creatives, triggered by endless optimism, and often leading to overbuying or to creating collections that did not really hit their mark. And one of our colleagues has worked in fashion for a very long time, and one thing she always said was that fashion retailers do not like data. Which is quite strange, of course, because data can provide you with relevant input for your decision making. So if we talk about the more digital way of running a retail fashion business, I think there are several questions we can try to answer, right? So how do you leverage data to minimize, for example, end of season markdowns and avoid excessive overstock? How do you control sales across channels in a better way using data? How do you bring data into the design process without compromising creativity? So how do you forecast the needs of the demand for new product introductions, for example? And how do you predict the future where data only looks back? And how can data and AI help to become more sustainable? So these are all questions that are becoming top of mind in fashion retail currently, and this drives also a lot of business for us as IG&H. So this is more of a context setting, and I would like to move on then to the example itself, Martijn. So that being said, we did a project for a leading fashion retailer that wanted to better steer on preferable levels of inventory and for an optimized profit. So the challenge that they had was that many of their products sold out before the next delivery, or sold out before end of season, creating out of stock situations and missed margins as well. So there was a need to balance inventory, demand, and margins, and to do this through pricing. So before we move on to the business objective, just a little bit context for this fashion retailer. So what they did was they have a purchasing model where they buy one batch of seasonal products, and then they have to manage that inventory for the next season. At the same time, they have a very short product life cycle of about 12 weeks. And because of this, there's a wish to early on in the season steer on its stock levels and its margin. And the objectives they gave us was, can we, because there was no demand forecasting yet within this fashion retailer, can we establish a forecast that is accurate enough to make smarter decisions about stock replenishment and pricing? So they essentially asked us, can we create an accurate forecast on an SKU location level on a given day for the coming 6 to 12 months? So that's the first question. Then, can we, based on that forecast, do replenishment and pricing to make sure that we do not run out of stock early in the season and that we get the most value out of our stock across the season? So these were the three questions they asked us. So can we better predict our demand? Can we, based on that demand, more effectively replenish our products within DC level and store level? And can we make sure that we, in season, already start with higher prices, lower prices, whatever, just to make sure that we get the highest margin possible and avoid excessive markdowns at the end of the season?
Yeah.
So
to get this business model right, you have probably a central warehouse or hub, and they distribute to the stores, and they have the first stock on shelf, and later on with the buyouts, the sellout, they will be replenished.
Indeed.
Right.
So the data center with multiple DCs indeed, and multiple stores across the Netherlands, and that's indeed the question they have. Yeah.
All right. So how do you solve it, and how do you went forward to the forecasting element?
Yeah, so maybe start with forecasting indeed. So in essence, data science has evolved in the past years, right? So this enables advanced forecasting and replenishment. And what was traditionally always the case was if a retailer wanted to know its demand for the coming 8 weeks, they would look at the same 8 weeks last year and the 8 weeks prior. And maybe if they had a promotion, they would do plus 10 to 20%. But now we are in a digital age with advanced techniques like AI, random forest, machine learning, you name them. So there's a lot more opportunity to create an accurate forecast. And that's what we have done for them as well. So what we have seen at different clients is that the forecasting of your demand can be broken down into a few distinct buckets. And we have tried to model each of those buckets as good as possible. So I think we have a few slides beyond this, Martijn, where we show for each of the screens 1 to 6 what kind of algorithms or advanced techniques we use to model that demand.
Yes. So first, is it the first one?
Yeah, the first one is out of stocks. So of course, if you look at historic data, you might have situations where there was no stock in the store, but that could have been a sale if there was stock. So we use AI to find those out of stock moments and correct demand for those moments. That's the first thing we do.
Second one?
Second one is we look at sales over time, and we try to find seasonal patterns.
Yeah, that's quite usual. But the third one is also very important, especially when you see COVID-19 and ending, and then consumer behavior is changing.
Indeed. So where the second one has everything to do with seasonality, the third one has everything to do with recognizing trends and breaking point. So based on actual data, our system can quite accurately predict how trends will develop over time, and also when they will stop. I think this is really important for example, fashion and new product introductions, to recognize that sales are going through the roof, for example.
Yeah, and I saw it, in the paint industry, PPG was, on time, but scaling down their manufacturing of paints for the consumers because they already have painted their whole houses, whereas AkzoNobel was too late to recognize, the breaking point of the decline, and then now they have a lot of paint on stock, unsold.
Yeah, and they could solve it with a good forecasting technique that focuses on trends and breaking points. Indeed,
they could have solved it. Now they are stuck with a lot of paint.
Yeah,
Maybe and product life cycles. Maybe you can elaborate a bit more on that.
Yeah, so product life cycle. So what we also do is we estimate the product life cycle of all the products in assortment, and this is especially relevant for new products as well, where we can estimate a product life cycle based on all the data points we have, and we let AI formulate the product life cycle for new products.
Okay, but it's very important, especially in retail, in phasing in and phasing out at the right time.
And of course, we have the growth and decline figures. I think we can move on from this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and local patterns, of course, right? So we can predict demand for specific products in a city in Utrecht, and that could be different from a city in Groningen, for example.
Yeah.
So having these local patterns in your demand is very important.
But it's good to see that you have broken down the statistical forecasting in 6 separate graphs or elements, because otherwise you're drowning in your statistical forecasting and you don't know what to do with it.
Indeed, and this is the way we try to structure it, and this is also in our eyes the most logical way to structure this. Of course, you can have 10 more of these buckets, but will they really make your forecast better? We doubt it. So we stick with the basics, and this is the basic.
I got a question from the audience. Can you a bit elaborate how the product lifecycle can be found out in the fashion industry?
Yeah. To be honest, I'm not a data scientist, but I can try to answer this question from my own point of view. So what we do is we look at product life cycles of all the products in the assortment, and whenever we introduce a new product, we use our model to find patterns in product life cycles of products with similar characteristics. Yeah. That's, I think, in essence, the answer to your question.
Okay. All right. And another point you mentioned is pricing, and from static prices we go to dynamic pricing. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. So of course, the real value is in the integration between planning, pricing, and replenishment. But maybe very shortly elaborate a bit on what dynamic pricing really is. So typically, prices are set for longer periods of time without the flexibility to quickly adjust prices in case of changing market conditions. So you will have one price for the entirety of a season. And in case of fashion, and in the case of this example, you will probably have markdowns by the end of the season. So what we do, what dynamic pricing essentially does, is it creates multiple price points over a longer period of time. So this would also mean that if you see your demand skyrocketing and you have very little stock left, you could increase your prices, and based on the price elasticity, your demand will be lowered, and you will have enough stock to at least make it to the end of the season. So that's just an example. But if you talk about dynamic pricing, it's in essence adjusting your price almost on a daily basis for different locations, for different product sizes, to be able to meet all customer demand.
What you see now in the stores in Albert Heijn in the Netherlands, you see it also with the on the shelves. You see, dynamic prices. It's not like fixed prices anymore. So they are now also apt to adjust these prices on the shelf.
Indeed. So one of the greatest examples I always think about is MediaMarkt, where they have these electronic price tags, right? And it could be that you're looking at the specific product, and while you're looking at the product, the price changes. That really is the essence of dynamic pricing.
You blink your eye and the price has changed.
You blink your eye and the price has changed.
Yeah. So maybe you can tell us how to stay ahead as a retailer, and especially as a fashion retailer. But then we can to the end result of this fashion retailer example.
Yeah. So retailers can retailers, but other companies as well. With direct to consumer channels can stay ahead of the curve by taking an integrated approach to forecasting, planning, and pricing. And if we click a bit through, Martijn, we'll see the clouds pop up. But it's a bit of a complex visual we look at here. But in essence, what we see here are the gray bars are actual sales volumes. The right side, we see the price index, which is also the dotted line we see. But the essence of the message that we want to portray here is that there is a lot of value in integrating your demand forecasting, your supply chain planning, and pricing. And we have named a few examples here. So the first one is, of course, that you consider your historic and actual price positions in the market to create the forecast. So it always amazes me how organizations try to forecast their demand without having a view on what their prices were in the data they used to forecast their demand. Because your price is, of course, one of the biggest influences on your demand. Second of all, analyzing competitive prices to calculate the effects they might have on the forecast. So if your demand in a specific week is very low, while your price hasn't changed at all, it could be that your customer or that your competitor has drastically lowered their prices, cannibalizing your demand. Third of all is, of course, that understanding whether historical sales were organic or impacted by promotions and discounts. So if you take into account your sales data for the past 5 years, you might want to know when and how big the promotions were that you ran, because they did impact your demand for the time. But last but not least, I think the most important part is using price elasticity algorithms to determine the right price and correct forecast for promotions and markdowns. And if you take all of this together, this is what really provides value to our customers as well. And this is what we did for the fashion retailer, is that we calculated a business case for them, the total potential value of having a strategy that links your planning, forecasting, and pricing. So what we see on the page here is just one small example of this total value case of several million euros, where we have a situation, a specific SKU that we expect to run out of before the end of the season. The specific SKU has a moderate understock and a low price elasticity. And therefore, we proposed a price adjustment of 10%. And with this price adjustment of 10%, we see that we could achieve an additional margin of 332 euros. So this is one very specific example out of a larger value case for one specific product, showing that asking higher prices earlier in the season can result in higher margins in the end.
Yeah, but it's good to see that you are doing this kind of exercises on an SKU level, very detailed, because that's what we can do right now with the computational power and analytics you have. All right.
This
Yeah.
is the level we should do it, Martijn, because this is the level where it works.
Yep. No, I totally understand. Thanks, Karen. Carrie, maybe you can move on to the other retailer case.
Yes, I will. And it's actually a retail brand that is familiar to at least all the Dutch people in the room. It's HEMA. So the question from HEMA was a little bit different than the going in objective that the fashion retailer posed to us. Where this all started was that HEMA told us that they had challenges in ensuring product availability, both on and offline. And they asked us to help them to look really across the whole end-to-end supply chain ecosystem, what the causes were for this availability issue, and how to enhance and optimize the way processes were running using scalable IT solutions. So this for us, when we talked about the last case that Karen presented, is very much linked to the intelligent steering topic. And this case has more to do, I think, with both the hyperconnectivity and the agile and scalable design. Because in this case, they found that sometimes their IT setup was holding them back from being able to react quickly to the demands that they received.
All right. So maybe you can elaborate more about where you focused on in this particular project.
Yeah, so I will not go through this all of the text here, but as I said, the challenge was really around product availability and digitization of the supply chain, and we focused on 4 specific areas that are actually also linked to the ecosystem that we talked about before. So one area was forecasting and supply chain and operations planning to enable to make sure that they were able to meet the need and to also predict the need that would come to them and make sure that the stock that they had both in the supply chain network and also in the store was sufficient, but not too much to meet the demand.
Okay.
They also had a challenge around supplier management, making sure that they were communicating in the right way and passing through the information to and from suppliers. And a more generic topic was around how can we improve our processes and make them more efficient and more effective by using, in this case, low code.
Yeah. And maybe I can explain a bit more with this visual of this ecosystem with all kind of projects next to it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, this is one that we talked about before, and this is also was very true and relevant for HEMA, where they also noticed that to get to the heart of the product availability, they could turn many levers and act on many different areas. So ranging from stock planning, promotion availability, stock level, avoiding over or under stock, the demand forecasting, as we mentioned before. Also store operations, making sure there was sufficient supply and also that the data that was gathered from a point of sales was correct. More proactive data-driven steering, smart automation using low code, and the supplier management bit.
All right. And if you look at the specific initiatives, you mentioned low code. Maybe you can tell us a bit more. You are here in depth about what kind of tools and applications you were using and adding to.
Yeah, I think so. It's good. These are really nice examples because they started out as actually pretty simple apps that were built in most of them a couple of weeks, but they offer a lot of potential to expand further and bring even more value. But already these 4 brought really a lot of value in HEMA in optimizing their processes and increasing the product availability. So I cannot put it on the page, but in fact, the availability went up by 2 to 5%. And if you know that 1% of product availability means between 0.5% and 1% of sales, then you know that this is quite a big impact.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm seeing here, you see SAP and Blue Yonder in there. So basically, you are enhancing existing applications with apps with low code to make it more accessible and to connect it.
Correct, indeed, and that's I think the value that we brought in this project is really to bring together different sources of information and make those data being able to make decisions based on those data, which you could not do when you look at one system alone. So it's one on the one hand side bringing that visibility and bringing data from different sources together, and also really for simplifying and automating processes so that there was less manual work involved, and that also of course saves a lot of time and increases the reliability of the process.
Yeah, yes. And in retail, you see a lot of product introduction, phasing in, phasing out, and that is a whole process. You also
Yes.
have managed that.
And
To
that
great
was
extent.
really a headache, and actually it's something that we see at other clients as well, that this process is often very cumbersome, goes through many layers and many different systems. And this is how it was for HEMA, where there was really in this specific process a lot of manual activities like an email, manual approval that needed to be sent, a commutation request created in Excel and then sent to MDM and in SAP. Where it had to be transformed to a CSV and uploaded into SAP. So it was quite cumbersome. And now what we implemented was a very simple tool based on Microsoft Power Platform that automatically gets the data so in a template that was embedded in the application, and the application made sure to execute the relevant checks that normally would be done by a person, and then provided them to MDM, where it was automatically updated if it was meeting the criteria. If not, or if there was an issue, then there was still an email going to the planner of the head of supply chain. So this was really more exception-based steering, and I think that's something that you can achieve with digital by telling the algorithm in which cases can you make the decision standalone, and in which cases do you need to check. You focus the attention of the people on those cases where you need to have some kind of humor in intervention, and the rest just goes automatically.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Carrie. Maybe Karen, maybe to wrap up, maybe you can summarize where to start. We are closing the end of the webinar. Maybe you can summarize.
Yeah, so digital transformation in supply chains. How do you embark on this journey? We have defined 4 possible ways to start. So the first one is prioritize the digital battleground. So what we mean by that is that you should start small and concretize the approach case by case. So having a clear view on how to make digital initiatives smaller, behapbaarder in Dutch they call it, I think, and finding a pragmatic way to start. I think that's really key. On the other hand, also using smart tooling to pick up the speed is crucial as well. So if you talk about low code, I mean, high code, it involves investments, and it involves resources and time to build something. If we talk about low code can really be the solution to a lot of companies that are embarking on this digital transformation by providing, the first steps towards building new products. Third one is building appetite around digital and creating and nurturing a data-driven culture. So what we have seen is that it's really key that digitization is a topic on top of mind, not only within technology teams and data teams, but across entire organizations. And having this culture of digital innovation and design thinking and all of these things that we do nowadays, I think that's really helpful as well. And last but not least, it's really good to measure and spread contagious results. So if you perform these first steps and you take on these first digital initiatives, make sure to measure their value and to really communicate about those company-wide.
Okay, cool. So we're getting to the end of the webinar. There's one burning question from the audience I see already being put here. Maybe you can answer it, probably, Karen. What are the best digital tools you've seen to anticipate consumer demand in advance of actual retail pull-through?
Sorry, Martijn, could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, you can read it right down. But there was a question. What are the best digital tools you've seen to anticipate consumer demand in advance of actual retail pull-through? You have your Nielsen, but maybe you see other data points where you can have some usage. Or maybe Carrie, you can answer.
Yeah, so I think I've been thinking about this a little bit when I read the question, but I think the answer is not that there is one digital tool that can predict the future. But I think from the example of the fashion retailer, the ability to combine different data sources, I think that would be really where the trick is, to combine demographic information, actual things like, for example, weather or events that are happening, so more external information with patterns that you see in comparable products, seasonality. So I think combining all those data sources would be the key. And then the answer is maybe something like a data lake and an intelligent way of bringing that together and drawing conclusions from it, rather than one single tool.
Yeah, and I see it like the soap retailer Lush is using a lot with social media and extracting from social media with their own postings on Instagram and you name it, to get some more feeling about how markets are developing. Unfortunately, I have a lot of questions myself, and I can imagine there is some more questions from the audience. But we have an extra 30 minutes right after this, so if you have more questions to Karen, Carrie, or myself, please join us in this digital lounge. You can join us at the table at table 1. So I invite you to have an extra conversation in the next 30 minutes. What we have done in the last half year, we created this visual about the ecosystem. You can download it. Basically, it's similar to what Carrie has presented. It's like the supply chain is not linear anymore. It's like looks like a cloud from SimCity or you name it, with all kind of stakeholders, with all kind of flows of goods, of information, and financial flows. So basically, if you want to start somewhere, point out where to start. Where are your data hubs? Where are your working capital, and you name it. So this kind of visualization helps out. And this one is downloadable. This is about household products, so you can find it online. And next, together with IG&H, we have created checklists for smart replenishment. It's also available online on our website and also through this QR code. So there's more from this side. And thank you to Carrie and to Karen for joining and explaining what you've been doing. So thank you. And to wrap it
Thanks
up,
for the opportunity, Martijn.
yeah, you're welcome. And
Yeah.
to the audience, thank you for listening in, and I hope you enjoyed it. This is being recorded, so the presentation will be made available within 48 hours. Also, the recording will be made available. So I hope to see you again in the next webinar or a live event. And thank you, and thanks again. And maybe I will see you right next in the lounge, where you can talk directly to Karen, Carrie, and myself. Thanks a lot, and bye-bye.
How do we get to the lounge, Martijn?